So yeah, I guess, my first question, well, first comment really is, congratulations on Broken Bird being selected for Fright Fest. It's not just been selected, it's opening the festival and it's opening the 25th anniversary of the festival. How are you feeling about, about the screening?
Yeah, I feel good about it. I mean, this film and this team, I've worked with them before, as you know, from like working on with a couple of projects before. But this is Joe Mitchell's first sort of directorial debut. I've worked with her in her capacity as a producer before, and I'm very close to her and to Dominic Brunt, her partner and sort of longtime collaborator. And I love them. And when Joe rang me and said, "Oh, we're gonna do another film," I was just like, "Yeah, of course, I'm in." It's no doubt. And I didn't realize quite like the ambition of the project and the scale, because the stuff that I've done before for them has been like quite modest, like sort of smaller on the smaller indie end of the low budget stuff. And this had a lot more scope, a lot more scale, and it was shooting in Serbia, which was unusual. But I think from the point of Fright Fest, I mean, I've been to Fright Fest a couple of times now. I love it, and I'm not a particular sort of horror film aficionado, but I'm sort of growing in that direction as a result of having been there a couple of times, and I love it. And the fans are passionate and loyal, and to be selected for the opening film is a real credit to Joe and the whole team. Really, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant accolade and achievement, and I think the film will go down really well. I saw it at a cast and crew recently, and I was really like surprised how macabre and dark and funny it is. Because for me, it's like it's a moving film because it has a lot to say about trauma and historical kind of trauma, but it's also a deeply weird and unnervingly funny film, I think. Yeah, so it's great. I'm really excited.
And you mentioned there that you've worked with Joe, previously in I guess a producing capacity. How does Joe as a director differ from Joe the producer and Joe the friend?
Well, I mean, she's brilliant, and there's just sort of endless enthusiasm, and I love directors who really, because sometimes there's a disconnect between the director and the actor, and I think the brilliant thing about working with Joe and working with Dom in his capacity as director, and in this case as writer, they're both actors themselves, and they understand. They value what actors do, and they really know how to communicate. Because sometimes there's brilliant directors, obviously, that haven't acted themselves. Of course, it's not an essential component of directing, but it's really useful when they have that shorthand and can communicate it. And it just means the process is a bit smoother, and they trust you. I think there's a lot of trust with them, which is lovely. Yeah.
And your character Mark has sort of two sides to him. There's kind of who he actually is, and then there's this version that Sybil sort of projects onto him. How did you prepare for these two different portrayals of him?
I involved myself in a major motorbike accident. No, I didn't. I think that, yeah,
Really?
it's an interesting character because it's like you do have to play this fantasy version, which is a sort of ludicrous fantasy that Sybil has. It's kind of like a Mills and Boone kind of fantasy from sort of 50 years ago almost, and it's sort of lovely, and it's kind of like a childlike fantasy because she hasn't really ever, as often with kind of historic trauma, people often don't evolve past that point. So her fantasy version of a man is this kind of Prince Charming, kind of James Bond-esque in a tux, sort of sweeping her off her feet. And I don't think I realized quite how like different that is to the reality until we got there in this, on set with the suit on, with the sort of like the soft light and haze, and it's a very different idea. And I felt quite awkward at first, but had to just lean into this kind of schmaltzy, kind of cheesy version of it. And like that's all right. I'm a bit cheesy, so I can get on board with it.
And Sybil is, she's such a complicated and intense character. How was it working with Rebecca on, getting those dynamics right between her and Mark? Because they do sort of shift sometimes even, within the same scene.
Yeah. I mean, Rebecca is a brilliant, brilliant actor. I mean, I think she's one of the best actors I've ever worked with. And like her commitment to the role was really inspiring. I mean, like I've thought about it a lot since actually. I mean, every day trying to find nuance and detail and really sort of, I mean, her role is so complex. I mean, with Mark, there was a simplicity to his character. he was kind of taken as you see him, very much straight up, pretty regular guy. Sybil had sort of projected this other thing onto him, but in essence, he was kind of, what you see is what you get, and he's a sort of fairly quiet kind of an introvert, really. So I suppose that there was the complexity of playing the role that Rebecca had to play was really like it could have been quite an onerous task. And she has obviously like lots of time on screen, lots of complex emotional kind of stuff to deal with. And I just sort of thought the best thing I can try and do is be as supportive as I can to her process. And I think hopefully I did that and allowed her to sort of, really have free reign to do what she wants to do with the character of Sybil. And I think, that we got on famously, and like I really enjoyed working with her. And I didn't know her before. I knew her work, I'd seen her in stuff, but I'd never met her before. So it was a really, really nice working relationship. And yeah, one I'd like to work with again. I mean, I write and direct a little bit myself, and I have sort of thought to myself, she's such an interesting actor. Like, she's so unusual and varied in what she can do, that I'd quite like to sort of write something with her in mind, because she's fab. Yeah, I like her a lot.
I think one of the other sort of strong elements in Broken Bird is the use of color and the use of locations. Everything kind of seems to have this duality. There's the grays and blues, and then there's the oranges. Like the morgue is very, cold and clinical, but then, the bar where she does her poetry reading is kind of like warm and cozy. What was it kind of like working in those environments? Because, Mark does appear across the gauntlet. Did the lighting, impact on your performance at all? Or, did it make, did the pub make you feel slightly more cozy, and, the mortuary, less so?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that's a real testament to like the production design and to Joe's kind of vision. I mean, I remember seeing the storyboards and seeing these really bold kind of colors and almost slightly kitsch 1970s, occasionally a bit Art Deco kind of vibe. This kind of old, sorts of old world, otherworldly kind of aesthetic that gives it a real, at times, a kind of slightly gothic quality. I mean, I think that's definitely intentional. And yeah, there was definitely a different feel to the different locations. I mean, without sort of giving away any spoilers, like the climax of the film, like I was just stunned when I walked in to see what they'd created with that location. I mean, it was genuinely sort of extraordinary. Like the detail of the sort of the broken down toys and prams and foliage, and it was all created brilliantly. And I mean, Igor, the cinematographer, was also brilliant with light and using light to sort of really, yeah, bring out each moment of those scenes. As you say, the sort of the coffee house poetry reading is warm. It's where she feels comfortable. I think it's where, most of them feel comfortable. And then, yeah, the cold kind of slightly more clinical aspect of the mortuary and everything in between. I mean, like, it's really interesting, isn't it? You get that sort of slight sort of Wes Anderson use of color at times, those sort of pastels and those rich reds, and there's lots of obviously blood and references to blood and death in the film, and I think colors used really well in that regard. Yeah.
I mean, sort of going back to the beginning, you said that, Joe approached you and said, look, I've got this new project. I'd like you to be a part of it. This film goes to some very dark places, particularly involving, your character. What was your reaction when you initially sat down and read the script?
Um, I suppose I wasn't surprised, because I know what Dom and Joe like in terms of their scripts and their writing. So I was a bit like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But no, I mean, I think I liked the fact that it's this sort of, this idea of broken bird syndrome, this idea of kind of people trying to sort of attach themselves to people and things that are inherently sort of broken. I mean, even at the less intense end of the spectrum, I think that's just part of human nature. I mean, people look to rescue in unhealthy relationships, and I think this is just has dialed that up to 11, so to speak, and it's given a sort of a very visual, dark, macabre kind of storyline that I think is quite relatable in terms of how people look for what people look for in terms of recreating their past and their childhood experiences. I mean, without being too like Freudian about it, that is like I think that is the root of a most psychoanalysis is like seeing people replicating behaviors that they learned or didn't learn when they were children. And I think that this is that, but just with added kind of blood, gore, death, and broken bones.
And yeah, having screened, a variety of films at Fright Fest in the past, you're sort of familiar with the audience and what they like, what they don't like. What do you hope that they take from watching Broken Bird?
Um, I think it's just nice to see something that feels original. Like I, like no film is perfect. Every film has its kind of things that you think, oh, and of course, when viewing it, obviously, especially actors, because we're all so bloody self-important, we're always going, oh, my performance. But like, I think overall, the thing that I was really impressed with is just how, sorry, a wasp's attacking me. It's just how original it is and how unusual it is, and and how the film manages to kind of walk that very difficult line of being sort of darkly funny. I mean, James Fleet in anything is always inherently funny, so he's amazing, and he brings a lot of that levity, I think. As does Rebecca. She's very funny as well. But yet, dealing with very intense, very dark storylines, like with the missing child and the idea of like what Sybil is actually engaging in is so dark that and I think originality is really to be lauded, but because I think there's just so much of the same, and when you see something that is different and unusual, I think that's a credit to Joe and Dom.
Well, I wish you best of luck with the screening and then the release.
Thank you very much. It's nice to chat. Thank you.